Howdy. Thanks for joining us tonight for the presentation of the 2017 McLane Leadership and Business Award. This is really a cool award for those of it as the Busch School, because the Busch School in our mind is all about principled leadership and making a difference. And that's what this award's all about. And it is absolutely what the award sponsor is all about. So let me start tonight by recognizing Mr. Drayton McLane and thank you for his sponsorship of this award and for everything you've done for so many different people and organizations over the years, sir. It's an honor to have you here again. Along with Mr. McLane tonight are his son, Drayton McLane III. Drayton, would you raise your hand so everybody knows where you're sitting down here? And some other leaders from the McLane group. So, folks, thank you for joining us as well. Now, you're going to hear a lot about our award winner in just a moment, but some of his leadership team from Silver Eagle Distributors is also here. Would you all please stand up and let everybody see you and say thanks for your time here? Thank you. We also have a couple of other special guests tonight that I'd like to recognize. The first one is the Grand Poobah of the Busch Center, the CEO of the George H.W. Bush Library Foundation, David Jones, who's right here in the front row. David, thanks for being here. The Poobah. We have a couple of our Busch School Advisory Board members here as well. Tyson Volkel was here a minute ago but had to leave. Their dog died, and he had to get home and make sure his girls were okay when they got home. So Tyson's got tough duty this evening, but he's right where he should be now. Lynn Schlemeyer also was going to try and make it over. Lynn, I didn't see you, but are you here somewhere? Okay, she's probably covering for Tyson in the office. A couple of our development councils members I know are here tonight. Randy House, Lieutenant General, United States Army, retired. His wife Jeannie are sitting right here in the second row. Thank you guys for being here tonight. And Mr. Royce Hickman, the leader of all things civil and community, is with us again tonight. Royce, thank you so much for being here. And most importantly, in the audience tonight, we have members of the faculty of the Busch School, we have staff members from the Busch School, we have students from Texas A&M University writ large, and we've got students from the Busch School, maybe the most important part of the audience tonight, along with community leaders, friends, so many of you taking time to be here out of your schedules. Thanks for doing this. Let me kick things off by introducing to you Dr. Lori Taylor, the director of the Mosbacher Institute for Trade, Economics, and Public Policy, and our host for this evening's event. Lori?
Howdy, y'all. Howdy. Very pleased to have you here, and I'm extremely pleased to introduce you to this year's recipient of the McLane Leadership in Business Award. We will be presenting the award later today to Mr. John Nau, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Silver Eagle Distributors, LP, the nation's largest distributor of Anheuser-Busch products. Silver Eagle also distributes Grupo Modelo beers, a broad selection of microbrews and craft beers, and several non-alcoholic beverages and waters, and he would not bring free samples. We tried. So Mr. Nau's commitment to service is apparent not only through his excellent leadership of his organization, but also through a broad spectrum of participation in civic, community, and philanthropic organizations in Houston and throughout the country. He's chairman of the Texas Historical Commission and a member of the boards of directors for the National Park Foundation, the Civil War Trust, the Texas State Historical Association, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation, and the Congressional Sportsman Foundation. He serves on the University of Houston's Board of Visitors and as a trustee for the Texas Foundation for Conservation, the Baylor College of Medicine, and the Gilder Lehrman Institute for American History. Additionally, he's chairman of the steering committee for the proposed Lone Star Coastal National Recreation Area. His lifelong interest and study of American history provided him with the knowledge and background to serve as chairman of the National Advisory Council on Historic Preservation from 2001 to 2010, a position to which he was appointed by President George W. Bush. Okay. He is going to speak with us today, sharing his insights on the issue of leadership lessons from history. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Nau.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and clearly it is a privilege to be here tonight, to be here with all of you all. There are a few names in the history of Houston, and indeed Texas, that carry more weight than the name Drayton McLane. Whether it's been his amazing career as an entrepreneur in the grocery and food service business, or his time as the owner of the Astros, where I got to know him, or his long history of philanthropy, Drayton has been a leader who has made a difference in Texas and the United States. I'm honored to call him a friend, and I'm honored to receive the award in his name. Drayton, thank you for everything you've done for this school, this state, and this country. Thank you very much. And if there is one thing more than any other that Drayton and I agree on, it's that while we make a living by what we earn, we make a life by what we give. And so tonight I want to talk just a minute or two about my careers, one in business and one in historic preservation, kind of a leadership lessons from history. Tonight has been billed as a leadership lesson in history, and I certainly believe we can, and indeed we should study history to learn the lessons from it. Lessons that have been applied in any business. You can do it academically, by any leader of employees in almost any situation. Leadership, as I just told a group of students, is about arming your people, telling them what's expected, and then getting out of their way. Let them do the job. There's no leader who's going to do the job completely by himself or herself. The story of how I got involved in preserving history goes all the way back to the days of me growing up in Illinois. Now, like all of you, I believe in the greatness and the exceptionalism of our country. I've been fascinated by America's greatness and our history and how we became who we are today since I was a boy. I can still remember going to Springfield. Well, if you grow up in Illinois, it's an obligation to go meet Abe Lincoln in Springfield. And I remembered one specific act. That was going to his tomb and rubbing the nose of Abraham Lincoln. The rest of it is dark bronze. So many people rub that nose, it is bright. And then I had the privilege of watching my 5 grandchildren do that last summer. So literally, this was my first experience in touching history. As I said, I grew up in the Chicago area and had the chance to visit many Civil War battlefields on family trips into Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, and Kentucky. It started at my age of 9 when I went on one of those battlefields. That, combined with Lincoln, I was hooked. My visit on these family trips continued through the years. And as a matter of fact, it was a trip specifically to go to Virginia battlefields during my high school years that I visited the University of Virginia for the very first time. Then I had the real great opportunity to attend the University of Virginia. And as I told these students a minute ago, I'm going to tell this story on me. This is where I learned that I really needed to do some research in life, in business. On move-in day at UVA in September of 1964, I kept looking around and I knew something was missing. Finally dawned on me, there were no women. UVA was all men, and my lack of research as I said, I research things now. Well, I was a history major, and obviously that's a little bit ironic because I never took a business class in my time there. Although I will tell you, and I'm certain that some of you current students and former students would recognize that being in a major college environment trains you pretty well for the beer business. Following graduation, I married, went into the Marine Corps for a while, and then after the Marines, I started my career with Coca-Cola. First in Michigan, and then from Michigan to Illinois, to Iowa, and then Missouri. And I want to say to the students here that this is one of my first lessons. I know that millennials are really focused in on the issue of where they want to live. I will tell you that my advice would be early in your career, don't let the location dictate where your career is headed. Because I was moved to Iowa. Now, I hope I'm not going to offend anybody in here. But the only thing that was really, really good about Iowa, I was there during 2 pheasant seasons. And I wound up in my first opportunity to begin to learn how to turn things around. Wasn't long before my business interest intersected with history once again. At Coke, I was promoted at the age of 29 to be Vice President of Sales and Marketing at the Coca-Cola Bottling Company of St. Louis. At the time, the operation was in bankruptcy. Now, how in the world you can run a Coca-Cola operation into bankruptcy is still a mystery to me. But our predecessors had done it. So I came in along with a total different team, and we began to turn it around. However, the success there was not to last. Life lesson number 2. I got into a fight with the owner's son-in-law, literally. I learned an important lesson. Blood is indeed thicker than anything else. Or to put it another way, don't punch the boss's son-in-law. I was unceremoniously dismissed from Coca-Cola. I had no job, no plan, and no future. But I did have some relationships, so this is life lesson number 3. Always leave people smiling. I had this relationship during my time with Coca-Cola with the people at Anheuser-Busch, and particularly the president. He heard that I had lost my job, so he called me up and asked me a question that changed my life. He said, "How would you like to get into the beer business?" Well, with all the education I had at UVA, I said, why not? And as they say, rest is history. I put together $4 million and a team of investors, moved to South Florida, and took over the Anheuser-Busch distributorship in a little town called Homestead, Florida. Silver Eagle was born. And there's a great lesson here, number 4, for any aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience. Sometimes a closed door is the opening of a door to even greater opportunity. I've always said if that son-in-law ever walked back into a room I was in, I don't know whether or not I'd hit him or hug him. But the opportunity was there. And I always encourage any, especially our young employees, to always be aware and keep your eyes open for opportunities in the marketplace, your home, your church. Opportunities are always there. After 2.5 years of running the South Florida distributorship, In 1986, my partners and I had an opportunity to acquire another struggling Budweiser operation here in Houston. Now, the beer business, folks, has become a little bit more complicated these days, but it's all about marketing, branding, and respecting and listening to your customers. And I believe that I could bring those skills to the Texas market. Obviously, Texas quickly became home. At the time, there were 7 Coors distributors, 5 Miller distributors in the territory that we had, which is fundamentally Metro Houston. Today, there are no independent Coors distributors, and there are only 2 remaining competitors that are combined Miller and Coors houses. Today, as you've heard, 30 years later, we are fortunate to be the largest Anheuser-Busch distributor not only in Texas, but in the country. We acquired San Antonio about 10 years ago, and I'm proud to say that we have a 70 market share in Houston and 62 market share growing in San Antonio. But in reflecting on my career, I don't think of it in terms of me. I think of it in terms of we. The historian David McCullough has said that one of the biggest myths in history is the myth of the self-made man. There is no such thing. None of us operate as a lone wolf. Every great figure in history, and I've read about hundreds of them, had great help along the way. And this is exactly the same truth for people in business. That linkage between history and leadership and business and leadership is right there. It's right in front of us. In looking back at my life on business, I can see how right David McCullough is. At every turn, I depended on others to help me. I don't care if it was in the Marines, if it was at Coca-Cola, or selling Anheuser-Busch beers. One of the best decisions I ever made was deciding to create what I called enlightened ownership. This was the idea that key leadership on my team should be part of the process of planning, of implementing. They should be invested in our business success. And along the way, I and we implemented several policies to create that kind of a team atmosphere. I began with an open door policy. I encouraged employees, no matter what their job, to come into the office and tell me what was going on, what was good, what wasn't good. I found that this not only humanized the president, me, to the employees, but it also provided a balance to the mid-level managers who knew that their employees could come talk to the boss. And there wasn't going to be any mistruths. And the front rank employees, just like a private in the Marines or the Air Force, began to have faith in their leadership. It provided that kind of a balance. I believe then, as I do now, that I benefit from an open door policy as much as the employees did. I also began the 401k for the employees, not so much for their immediate benefit, but for their families' long-term benefit. And we did this long before 401ks were fashionable. I wanted the employees to know that I cared for them and their families, not only today, but through a 401k investment and education that I'll talk about here in a minute. It was for the rest of their lives. Education has been very important to me. I was the first one in my family ever to graduate from college. That is why I've always supported employees who decide to continue their education with tuition assistance. That's not unique. What we then did in 1988, I began a scholarship program for the children of our employees. One of the greatest moments for me every year is meeting the scholarship. We're doing 60, 70 of them a year now. I'll have these young people come to me and say, I'm the first one that's gone to college. And it's a direct, non-taxable benefit to the employees. And I'm proud to say that we have created a family atmosphere with all of our employees. You do not get to a 70 market share in a competitive industry like beer without employees who are willing to go above and beyond what's expected of them normally on a day-to-day basis. And I found this out when the Teamsters tried to organize us and the employees voted them down. That was, obviously, I felt good about that outcome, but I felt really good about how our employees viewed our stewardship. Investing in our employees' future beyond providing compensation and basic health care is one of the best ways that I know to make that kind of a difference. And for me, making a difference has also led me far beyond my office at Silver Eagle. In my business career, I've been able to invest in the future, and I've learned that historic preservation works. It's been an absolute success in investing not just in the past, but in the future. Throughout my journey through school, the Marines, my family, running a Texas business, I have never lost my love for history or the lessons that it teaches me. I have always had a sense of what T.S. Eliot described as the presence of the past. History is all around us. You all here at this great institution know that. It's not only in the buildings, it's in the students. It's what the students accomplish, whether on a battlefield or a boardroom. The only question is, are we paying attention to history? What's it teaching us? Are we learning from it? And are we doing everything we can to preserve and promote important historical moments and places? By preserving and promoting these places, we are not only sharing history, we are providing an economic boost to these areas of the country, Texas being one of them, that can have an influx of visitors due to heritage tourism. This is where I make the connection between business, preservation, and the study of history. The history lessons of the battlefields are clear, key lessons in leadership. That is why over the years I have taken my senior leadership team on Civil War battlefield tours so that they have a chance to learn these great lessons and apply them in our business. I try to have the team understand, follow your gut. If you're good and you've got good instincts, follow your gut. Because on those battlefields, those decisions were not made by committee. They're made by leaders. Today, West Point, Marines from Quantico, they still tour these battlefields. Many of my friends, and indeed my family, would say that I have managed to take an interest in history and turn it from a full-time into a full-time, non-paying job, especially Texas history. Our history, our people, and our natural resources are what makes Texas, Texas, and what makes us the greatest state in the greatest nation on the history of the planet. Now, I learned that bringing history to life is also about branding. It's about connecting with the visitor who is the consumer. It's branding, it's marketing, it's listening to and respecting people. And it can build local communities and local businesses, particularly in rural Texas. For it is the knowledge and the understanding of the places and people who came before us that provides the roadmap for our future. I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to serve as chairman of the President's Advisory Council on Historic Preservation under President George W. Bush. And one of the things that I decided early on was that work in historic preservation is, in fact, like a successful business. It takes a team effort. As chairman of the ACHP, and a lesson that I learned when I was chairman of the Texas Historical Commission from 95 to 10, I had the opportunity to take my love of history, combine it with my business experience, and help create a program called Preserve America. It is a federal initiative that encourages and supports community efforts to preserve and enjoy our priceless cultural and natural heritage. The whole goal here is business driven. It's to organize counties, states, combine all their assets, and drive heritage tourism. Heritage tourists, by the way, you've heard me use that phrase, will spend about $170 a day more than recreational tourists. That's why you want to get them into your towns and your museums. Now, what's great is that rather than a top-down traditional Washington approach, this program worked from the bottom up. It continues today with over 900 Preserve America communities and communities and neighborhoods designated in all 50 states. It is vital to this country's historic preservation efforts. So combining preservation, history, and business can and has worked. You know, our young people, how do we get young people engaged in the study of history? Many of you are thinking back to your high school days and maybe college days where history was a yawner. I believe that the young people of the United States do want to learn about the values, about the experiences of the past that shape who we are today, both the good and the bad. You can't whitewash history. Together, these programs are preserving the stories of the past. It is one thing to read about the Alamo. It is another to go walk through it and try to put yourself in the place of those men. Again, to quote David McCullough, history isn't taught, it's caught. When a young person experiences an historic site, he catches on and can begin a love affair with history that, as in my case, will last a lifetime. As I've said, it's not just good for the country, but historic preservation is good for business. In Texas, we do have some work to do. The only difference between a tourist who goes to Philadelphia and a tourist who'll go to San Antonio is that Philadelphia is organized. This is a business issue, and we have the resources and the assets to put, I think, more tourists into the state of Texas. I'm very proud to have played a small part in the historic restorations in our state and in our country. One of the great quotes of Teddy Roosevelt when he was president, he eloquently reminded us of the many natural treasures we have when he said, quote, "We have fallen heirs to the most glorious heritage a people have ever received, and each one of us must do his part if we wish to show that the nation is indeed worthy of this good fortune." So my life today continues to be focused on the same two goals it's been focused on for years. Making a profit, yes, there's nothing wrong with that. But more importantly, it's about making a difference. Whether it's my role as a corporate CEO, historic preservationist, or anywhere in between, there are some lessons I have learned along the way that I'll take a minute wrap up and impart to you. Number one, you've heard me say that we are the biggest, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was to be the best, to have the best employees, train them, make them feel proud of what they do. And this is tough work, folks, if you've ever been on a delivery truck. It's tough. We didn't set out to be the biggest, we set out to be the best. And today I can say that we are both. Here are some of the tips that have helped me along the way. I call them leadership lessons in history. First, find a cause that's bigger than yourself. Invest in it. Invest in the people around you. Invest till it hurts. In life and in business, teamwork really can make a dream work. But it doesn't, or it shouldn't be a small dream. Make it a big dream. That means a dream that's got to be bigger than you yourself. Secondly, do things right. The people will notice. As a CEO, you're not operating in a vacuum. I've learned that the employees do watch what you're doing. It's important to turn a profit, but it's also, I think, as important to help a young employee who is struggling. Help that individual turn their life around. Some people spend their lives building careers. I challenge our young managers to do the opposite. Spend your career building lives. You will reap dividends with that investment for years to come. And doing the right thing means caring for things other than the business. Whether it's philanthropy or historic preservation, rolling up my sleeves on volunteer work, I really encourage our people to give back to the community for all the blessings that we have had. And third, don't just study the past. Learn from it. History is of little importance. Studying leaders is of little importance if you don't take some wisdom from it. That's true in the history books, and it's true in our companies. Find new ways to do things better. It's also true of history. Look at great figures in history. Find ways to learn from them. I said earlier to these students, one of the greatest single decisions made in the Second World War was Eisenhower determining that they were going to go on June 6th because he wanted to get his men who were seasick off the ships. He then wrote his resignation letter and apology. He had faith in his men, but he wasn't sure of the plan. I think that's one of the greatest decisions ever made in this country's history. And Jefferson, learn about wisdom. Barely in his 30s, he asked to publicly defend the American Revolution. The document he helped to produce was our Declaration of Independence. It is so steeped in wisdom and truth that it remains the greatest written defense of freedom ever produced. From Lincoln, learn about perseverance. The man never lost focus on what he was fighting this country's deadliest war about. He knew he had to win. Dr. King, learn about courage. His entire public career, he fought to change the way things had been for centuries. He was under constant threat of harm, but he never wavered and he never flinched. In wrapping it up, history, in my opinion, is the greatest teacher of all. If we are only willing to pay attention to the lessons of history. It's more than a story of the past, it's a guidepost to the future. It can and should be studied and learned. and applied to our lives, whether it's in business or running a home. It can be useful. It's got to be preserved for generations and generations to come. Tonight I want to thank you for this humbling honor, and I promise to continue to make a difference in this state and in this country. That's my goal. Nothing more, nothing less, and nothing else. Thank you very much. Right here?
You're right over there.
Can I use this?
You surely may. It's there for you. Well, that was absolutely fascinating. And like a good student, I took notes.
You did.
So I have a few questions, some of which came from the audience and some of which came inspired by your comments. You never took a business class?
Never.
So where the heck did you learn leadership?
In reading history and life lessons that others have been faced with, and then if you look in the dictionary under on-the-job training, you're going to see my picture. It was all OJT.
Mm-hmm. So you spent time in the Marines.
Right.
Do you think that was one of your sources of leadership?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, and that was my real true connection to making certain that everybody understood exactly what we needed to do. If one person doesn't, the whole unit's going to fall apart. So, yeah, and I applied that, as I said, making certain that everybody has the right tools and knows what's expected of them.
Mm-hmm. How do you convey that to someone who doesn't especially want to listen?
Example, you're never, especially when there's a huge generation gap, you have peer group leaders within your company. When we started, I was still young enough that people were going to listen to me. Today, I'm very aware that anybody under the age of 35 is going to listen to their peer better than they're going to listen to me. So you have to have confidence that that similar age group understands what the objective is. And we have a good management team that passes that word down. And honestly, if somebody doesn't get it and doesn't deal with any kind of corrective education, and every once in a while you just got to cut loose. And you got to be prepared to do that. Otherwise, everybody else that's around that individual is going to see underperformance and not stay at the same level that we want. And you have to cut the rope.
So they talk about, in those business classes that you successfully avoided, they talk about some kind of management that's specific to the firm and management skills that generalize to all different kinds of contexts. Okay, you came up from the Marines and Coca-Cola and then into what became Silver Eagle. You seem to have been very sector specific in your professional career, kind of bottling and distribution issues. Do you think that the leadership skills you learned there would have generalized had you gone to some other line of work? When that door closed at Coca-Cola, if the call hadn't come from Anheuser-Busch?
You know, that's a really good question. As long as it was a labor-intensive business that required daily involvement from my level, I probably could have translated that, but if it was going into a different type of business, not a consumer good business, probably not. The ability of the beverage business to engage so many different types of customers from when Drayton had the Astros, huge customer there, all the way down to small restaurants. We have our largest customer base is convenience stores, and many of them in Houston are run by immigrants. And I have to tell you, I love the interaction that came from Coca-Cola and the beer business with this myriad of customer groups. And we have a good sales force that is really good at that. So I probably could not have translated the skills I learned at Coke in the selling aspect, probably the leadership side, but not, I would have had to have taken a step back, I think, to go into another type of business. You know, I tell people, if you can't have fun selling Budweiser, you're doing something wrong. So it's also all about enjoying what you're doing. And, you know, I tried getting cold Bud and Bud Light here for everybody, but the school wouldn't go along with it.
Oh, no, I'm telling that story different. So you really stressed, and I was really struck by your comments about spending time making a profit and making a difference. So I want to ask you a time management or time allocation kind of question. How much of a day, a typical day for you, do you spend making a profit, and how much of it do you spend making a difference?
7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, this business makes a profit. Not because of me, but because of everybody else that's on the team. I'll answer that question on my time of making a difference. I believe same answer, because you're making a difference not just in the history of Texas or investing in UVA or any of that. You've got to remember that you are improving the lives of the employee base. That's a full-time job. And as we grew, I was able to pull other times to go do these other projects. But at the end of the day, if I or anybody else ever takes their eye off of what the real business is all about, then you're making a huge mistake. So I'd say it's making a difference in the employees then allows me to go make a difference in other areas.
So you've made a difference in a lot of areas. When I read just part of your commitments to public service, you seem to be, I detected a few themes. You seem to be into history, into conservation, into medicine, into education. How do you decide where to engage, and how do you decide how much of your scarce time to devote to each of those passions?
I told the students, when people think about philanthropy, they think about money. The biggest thing that you can do for a 501c3 is time. And whatever you are able to add in, whether it's leadership or helping create a whole new strategy to go impact what that 501c3 is all about. Normally, I'll follow the leadership. I've gotten involved in a couple of medicine related issues, one here in the States, one in Tanzania, totally because of the medical leadership in it. I told the students, the 501c3s that you support, make certain they're being run like a business, that they have good leadership and they're effective. Otherwise, you're going to waste your time and probably your money if you don't lift up the hood and see what does that organization look like and how effective have they been. And I also told them that I bought companies that were easier to close than trying to merge two 501c3s. I got to tell you, folks, you got two boards that are wall-to-wall egos, and we had to merge two. They came out as one, significantly stronger, but we lost a third of each one of the boards in the process. So you're going to get involved, add value, and add value even goes with 501c3s.
Okay. So one of the ways you add value is with your time. One is with your knowledge. One of the ways seems to also be with leveraging some of Silver Eagle's resources. I'm particularly struck by the work that y'all did for hurricane relief with providing the water for a lot of folks. How deeply do you draw the business into the philanthropic effort? And how do you decide where to draw the line between your interests and Silver Eagle's interests?
Well, anything impacting our two territories, Houston and San Antonio, I see them as totally linked. Whether it's hurricane relief, improving the park system, improving education through some of the education programs in which we're engaged. There's a myriad of programs that impact the community. I mean, we sell 70% of the beer drinking adults in Houston and 62% in San Antonio. Those people have a lot of interest, and it's our obligation, I think, to positively touch their lives. And to your second question is, when do I step away from Silver Eagle and then, quote, do it on my own? That's when you have statewide impact or national impact, and that's more me, although the company has been very, very supportive in some of these projects. But, oh yeah, you've got to you've got to understand when the wall needs to be there and when it doesn't.
So when does it need to be there?
Again, when the issue is outside the beer business or outside of our territory. And the third thing you try to do is not involve the rest of your senior management team, because it'll take their eye. I have Roxanne Newman, who is brilliantly managing to keep her feet on both sides of that, but other than that, keep the business separate.
Okay. So shifting gears a bit, you led the National Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. And they're smack dab in the middle of all of this controversy regarding Confederate monuments. Do you have any advice for them?
Well, so does the state of Texas. Yeah, again, I told the students that one thing you absolutely learn when you're studying history is that you can't judge history from today's perspective. You've got to put yourself back. It's like trying to study the Civil War, understanding that the Union's going to win and viewing all of that in that context. Or Second World War. The Allies win, so what happened? Does the rest of it matter? Well, darn sure did. If it wasn't for Midway, it'd be a whole different outcome. What we've done in Texas is to create a rule that said on most of these monuments that are on county, the Southern soldier, not the generals. And after the First World War, many returning veterans could not find a job. And that then set off the explosion in the Klan. Every state had them, didn't have to be South. Every state had Klan members, and it was a result of these vets not being able to find work. The monuments that went up then are absolute indicators of intimidation. And those are the ones that need clear, detailed stories. I would put additional plaques up. That's what we're planning on across the state. But to take them down doesn't change history. Just doesn't. So that's, check the date of when they were and go read the papers on the speeches that were made. You'll see a dramatic difference from the original ones versus those that went up in the 1920s and 30s.
Cool.
That's more than you wanted to know.
Yeah, it's actually exactly what I wanted to know. So when you've been speaking about history, it's been easy for us to think about history as kind of battles and generals and big items. There's also a lot of history that's very mundane. You just keep the history of a particular corporation or organization. So one of the people in the audience wants me to ask you, what are you doing to preserve your corporate history?
Now that's a hell of a good question. What are we doing, Roxanne? I have absolutely never thought of that. Grounds, we need an affirmative vote from the county commission before our agency takes action and issues a permit for movement. That way, we make certain that it is in fact a local decision. I've been involved, obviously this whole thing began in Charlottesville, Virginia at UVA. And again, I would caution everyone, you can't view it today, or you can't view the Civil War from today's perspective. Secondly, yes, there was clear rebellion, but out of that, 5 Confederate generals stopped any chance of guerrilla warfare that would have gone on for years. It was Lee, Johnson, Bedford Forrest, Joseph Wheeler, and out here in the West, a guy named Taylor. When they surrendered, they said to their men, go home. And that ended it right there. You can make the case that Lincoln's assassination is what grew the Ku Klux Klan because of the occupation of the South, to include Texas. And from then on, things were bad for the next 30 years. One thing I didn't say to the students, check when these monuments were made. Most of the monuments that went up across the South and at Civil War, the major battlefield parks, were erected from the late 1870s through the 80s up to about 1912 at the onset of the First World War. And they were primarily for its, and that'll be a takeaway for me for this. If it's the history versus the legacy is are the students, the children of the employees that have graduated from college, the good things our employees have done as a company project, from cleaning up bayous and helping people, distributing water. Those are the kind of legacy, as opposed to just simply the history. What are the lessons? What I will do to the person that's asking that, what are some of the lessons we've learned? That's a good question, and I'll commit to you that I will do that. That's a good, but I'm more concerned about the legacy.
Cool. Well, in speaking of legacies, this award is one of the legacies of Drayton McLane, and I'd like to invite you, sir, to the stage to help present the McLane Leadership and Business Award to our
Yes? Okay.
guest.
Right here?
I think Drayton may say a few words.
Thank you, John. Very, very well done.
Thank you. I'm right here.
Yes, sir. And this is a real honor, and we're going to test your strength from the Marine Corps if you can hold this award. But you certainly have enlightened us, and they might take your stores away from you. But you have certainly done an outstanding job, and thank you for a friendship that you and I go back 25 years.
25
and I've learned
years.
a great deal from our friendship and our teamwork. So thank you for accepting this award.
Drayton? Thank you. Thank you. Now, wait a minute. I get to say, I will say one.
Say something.
I do?
You do.
Okay. Drayton, from the first time you and I negotiated a sponsorship deal, negotiating with Drayton, that will be a legacy story. Tough, but fair. And I've learned a lot from doing business with you. And you should have seen him at a political function out in Wyoming this summer. If he didn't know everybody in the room when he got there, he knew them all and talked all Texas from the minute he got there to the minute the event was over. So you're a great friend.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
hospitality, and we have certainly benefited by our friendship.
Yeah.
And I think we negotiated that both sides need to win in every discussion.
That brings them back the next time. That's
Absolutely.
it. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Whoop, Drayton.
One photo op.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Get,
No,
the
we're,
dean and I are feeling left out.
We need
so
the
we
dean
need in the
over here.
picture.
come on in.
It's okay with me.
Yeah. I need to
your
hide
school.
behind you. So, okay. You got it?
I got it.
All righty.
And the camera's back there.
Photo. Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you,
this evening.
folks.
Please travel safely.
Wow.
Bye.